Hello and welcome to Bettong Bungalow, our winter series, and I am here today on Ngunnawal land, and I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'm sitting right at the top of Jerrabomma wetlands, and I'm really excited to be here with a very special guest who I'm going to let him introduce himself. Gavin, can you introduce yourself?
Thanks Mel. I am Associate Professor Gavin Smith from the Australian National University, and I'm in the School of Sociology there. And I'm also, in my spare time, a professional snake catcher, and I run a local community service called ACT Snake Removals.
Tell me, Gavin, what is your project? What are you working on?
It's a very exciting project, most interesting thing I've ever worked on thus far in my career. And essentially what we're wanting to do is look at the everyday movement profiles, habits, practices, behaviours of eastern brown snakes in this suburban landscape. We're very privileged and blessed to live in this amazing Ngunnawal country, and I massively pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I think one of the things that really inspires this project actually is that Aboriginal tradition of really caring for country and really knowing how country is, is operating, and having a real sense of care for the creatures that make up that country. And one of the creatures that really doesn't get a lot of attention, or gets a lot of negative attention,
very much so, is
the eastern brown snake, Pseudonasia textilis. And I think one of the issues that we sort of confront here is the way in which snakes are popularly represented, culturally constructed as being these kind of figures of evil, figures of fearsome, loathsome, dangerous, corruptive, dirty creatures.
How dangerous are eastern browns? We know they're one of the most venomous in the world. Is that correct? How does that relate to actual deaths with people in Australia?
Yeah, I mean, it's very important to say eastern brown snakes are highly venomous entities. Their venom is comprised of really complex toxins, particularly neurotoxins, hemotoxins, procoagulants, and they can do all sorts of terrifyingly destructive damage to mammalian bodies like ourselves. However, that all being said, there are thankfully very few deaths in Australia as a result of snake bite each year. I think the figure is roughly about 2 or 3 in the whole of this
So if you're comparing that to road toll, which is what, 1,000 from car accidents?
Yes.
Okay, so start to put in some sort of context.
It does, and another thing that's really important to mention here about eastern brown snakes is that despite their popular representation as being, aggressive, nasty, a menacing surprise when it turns up, they're really timid and shy creatures.
Because we've always heard that with the red-bellied black snake. Oh, they're very shy, they're quiet, but the eastern browns are aggressive. So that's not what you're finding with your work. Yeah,
I mean, both in terms of me being a professional snake catcher and obviously someone who's now researching actively snakes in this landscape, my experience to date really over 5 years has been, and all the learning I've done from other people that have been working with snakes for a lot longer than that, has really been that, these guys really are very keen to avoid a confrontation with a human, because it's dangerous, it's risky for them. They might, it's expensive to make venom, they see us and perceive us as these big looming predators. So why would you go and attack a giant? I wouldn't.
Exactly.
They're going to use their lightning speed to take off and disappear, and that's what they'll typically do.
So what do we know about eastern browns when you get the call out? Okay, we've got a snake. It's in the childcare centre, which happens. We're a bush capital. We've got beautiful
certainly does happen.
schools, childcare centres, backyards right on the bush. Got a snake. You go in, but what happens to that snake once you take it from that spot where it's been and put it a long way away from where it was?
Yeah, that's a great question, Mel. And this is essentially, you've just hit the nail on the head with the project's rationality, which is we are fascinated to know what happens when we arbitrarily, as snake catchers, pick up a snake from a location, translocate it to a new environment, a new landscape, which we as humans think in an anthropomorphic way think is the right place, right belonging place for this creature, and then let it go. We've got no idea what happens to that animal when it exits the bag.
So we don't know. So researchers haven't, because this is a practice that's been going for a long time. Snake catching,
absolutely.
Removed from a very populated area and then put it somewhere else, which is what I wanted to happen until I met you and you started to change my mind. But so we don't know. So you're trying to find out what happens at this stage?
Yeah, look, there's been a lot of fantastic herpetological work internationally done on translocation, and almost all of it shows that the snakes do not do well as a result of translocation. And the reason being, there's lots of reasons actually, but some of the key reasons are, the first one, disorientation. The stress of being physically restrained, put into a bag, driven in a car out to a new location, released in a disorientating environment where they don't know where they are, and they don't know where the safe spots are. And so they're completely and utterly, we think, disorientated, stressed, and what research has shown is their movement patterns dramatically increase when you translocate a snake. And what we're already finding in this research, even the study, in preliminary results where we've released the snake right back into its home range, it's hardly moved at all compared to some of those snakes we've actually taken a bit further away.
So if they go back, so the one that you're tracking at the moment called Penny.
Penny, the lovely
and interesting,
Penny.
I want to ask you why you gave them names in a minute, but the one that you're tracking, you found they need to stay near their home range. A bit like us, we like to be homebodies.
Yeah, I mean, imagine that, Mel, if you just arbitrarily, as a big giant, picked me up one day, uprooted me, dropped me off in Central Australia,
and said,
go on, good luck, mate, stay safe. What would I do?
Yeah.
I mean, so I just want people to sort of empathise a bit more with these creatures. They belong here. They're a central figure in the ecological system. And I just want people to sort of realise that we need to look after them, we need to respect them and care for them.
And is this why the snakes you're tracking, you've given them names, particular ones? Is this why? Just to try and get that connection with them?
That's exactly, I mean, look, some people would critique me for being anthropomorphic, and fine, I am a human, I can't escape my humanness, my body, but I did it deliberately, strategically, to generate this kind of personalisation, this familiarisation with this very strange, esoteric figure. I think one of the key things I'd like to make is that people, I think, struggle to recognise themselves in a snake. The snake is so qualitatively different from what we humans see as, how we understand ourselves and things that we love in terms of cute and cuddly creatures, that, one of the reasons I'm trying to do this is to make this unfamiliar entity a bit more familiar.
And there's something about that wiggle of the snake. I
don't
know
the
what
serpentine
the
motion.
Serpentine. Is that actually something in our brains that makes us think, hang on a second, is that what it is?
Yeah, I do. Look, I think there's lots of things, Mel. I mean, certainly the locomotion is certainly a very interesting facet. The fact they are limbless creatures, they are unblinking, their stare is constant.
Yes.
We can't tell if they're male or female. They live largely on the ground in the dirt. They eat mice and rats. They even eat their own.
Do we know how they're going as a species? Because as we know, many species we have here at Jarrah Wetlands come to us as a haven. We look after species that are threatened, endangered, and then we have other species here who just love it and are flourishing. Do we know much about the snake, the eastern brown snake, if it's not coping with the current climate, with the current urbanisation? Do we know much about that?
We don't really know much about it.
Yeah,
I would say, would be fair to say. I mean, I think a lot of what the story is based on is anecdote, and there's people with tremendous experience working with these creatures over 50 years, but we still really only have our observations, and I think what this project is trying to do is take this sort of data-driven, scientific-based approach to it and try and really work out what is the ecological sort of relationships of snakes. And so one of the things we're really interested in actually in the project, what we're doing is we're actually taking biological samples from every single eastern brown snake we catch for certain size, and starting to, with colleagues in Fenner School of Environment and Society at ANU, starting to look at those genetic relationships, those population dynamics between different subpopulations of eastern brown snakes across Canberra.
And part of your project as well is you're seeing actually how to track them. Is that one of the major parts of this project, to then go on and do more study? That's
exactly right, Mel. This is very much a proof of concept pilot study. It hasn't ever been done before in this kind of context, the urban setting on this particular species. So this is quite novel in the sense we've seen some eastern brown research done in an agricultural landscape in New South Wales, some classic research done by Whitaker and Shine, but this is really quite novel in the sense of the context and circumstance of the research, and trying to understand how urban adapted eastern brown snakes live and behave in this really disrupted, disturbed landscape.
So what's been your sort of takeaway finding at the moment? You're only halfway through the study, is that correct? So what's your main thing you're discovering at the moment? Well,
the main thing we're discovering at the moment is, as you rightly said, how does the technology work? Because it may sound a very sort of simplistic thing, but actually it's very difficult finding eastern brown snakes. Why? Because we're using pretty primitive technology, which is telemetry. VHF is the key device we're using, which is implanted into the eastern brown snakes that have been caught as part of snake removals through the summer. And you know, these guys live, they're semi-fossorial. They live under the ground for large periods of time. They're inactive, they're dormant for significant periods of time. So if you imagine them being 30 centimetres, 40 centimetres in a burrow under the ground, and that transmitter is aimed down the way, it's just sending the signal like this, and you've got basically no signal. So that's one thing, is testing the technology, working out how it relates to the environment, the habitat and all those kind of things. Another key thing we're looking at really is habitat analysis. So where are these snakes naturally selecting to go to, to orientate to? What are they eating? So we're taking feces samples as well and analysing them. How much are they moving each day? How does that relate to thermal biology and the thermics? So I'm fascinated in that question about humidity and ambient temperature and ground temperature. And we're looking at how far they're moving and when they're moving. So that's really key. And we're seeing very much patterns already, I would say, although it's very early, as you say, but we're seeing patterns that snakes that have been basically what we call control snakes that haven't been moved anywhere are tending to keep a very small circulation of a range, whereas these translocated ones, we've only taken them about 2 kilometres so far, so not very far.
They're still then moving a big way. Are they trying to get home? Do you think?
I would suspect at this early stage that we're pretty confident those snakes are orientating themselves back towards at least the edge of their range. One snake in particular, one of my favourites, Flojo, Eastern Brown one. Yes, I'm very fond of Flojo. Yes. She was released out in a reserve outside a suburb where she was caught, and actually Flojo is very interesting. Flojo has been caught, I believe, 3 times. Wow. Twice by myself, once by Luke from the other snake catching business.
And one of our rangers here.
One of the rangers here, exactly. So between Luke and I think we've caught her 3 times. And interestingly, she's been caught pretty much on the same street twice by me, and I think Luke caught her maybe on the street down from that. And so I've released her way back into the bush next to that suburb, and Flojo has taken a little bit of time and she's circular, done some holding moves. But she's now home. She's actually gone back to the suburb and is now in underneath someone's front driveway.
So I guess then maybe us as humans need to learn to live with these creatures rather than trying to remove them from our space. Is that what you're hoping to? I mean, you can't have a snake in a childcare centre yard or in a school centre.
I feel that these snakes, if they are not persecuted, if they are left alone, I really feel their level of risk is so small. So for example, in the botanical gardens, Australian National Botanical Gardens, I'm aware of a number of snakes that live there and have that as their home range, and those snakes literally will have people walking right next to them, actually on them. And I don't believe there's been any records of a snake bite in the Australian National Botanical Gardens, and that's people every day habitually interacting with them. So and the reason is, I think, is because they are not persecuted, because they're not being whacked with shovels, they come to be attuned to us and they become tolerant of us. This is my theory. And those snakes that are continually persecuted, chased around gardens, hit with shovels, people try to drive over them, cats getting them, they are the ones I would say are much more edgy. Much more edgy. I mean, we would always say actively defensive.
Well, I really recommend you go and have a look at the Facebook page you set up, because the footage on the project Facebook page is amazing, of seeing the snakes come out of the burrow hole. What do we call it? Burrow. So thank you so much for chatting to me on Bettong Bungalow today, Gavin, and I really appreciate it. And check out the Facebook site, and also keep looking to our website as well, because come on a tour and you might get to see a snake.
Thanks very much, Mel.
Thank you.
Cheers.